very local. The other is quite big, a very regional and national level. So I think I shouldn't waste time, and I'll just jump to it. So basically, there's a cafe which you might have seen in other parts of Pakistan as well, which is called Sweet Tooth. And they have established this nice setup close to Atawad Lake in Hunza. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves to take pictures there. But then, not everything that seems sweet is that sweet. So they collaborated with another paint company called Gobies or whatever. And then they have painted the walls of Hunza, mostly on the roadsides. And their reason to paint it is to make it colorful, to make it vibrant, to make it, all the things that you generally learn about. But the locals are really upset about it. And the reason why locals are upset about it is because, first of all, it doesn't gel into the local color and the local terrains, which you will see in some of the pictures. And secondly, none of the local artists, none of the local community had anything to say with it. And also because of the fact that the natural environment there is so rich that you wouldn't think about doing anything extra to it, right? So like if people ask me about the environment there, I often say that God's such a good artist that you feel really small there when you're standing next to the mountains, when you're standing like looking at how like huge everything is. You feel really small, and you feel like you have to look for a purpose or find your purpose, or you have to look for things to be extraordinary, because everything around you is so amazing that it makes you feel really small on a greater scheme of things. And it kind of worries. So people, because they respect the nature so much, in that sense, most of the people, they try to reserve it as much as they can. So they wouldn't go and do these things. The local people, the local artists, you wouldn't find them going and messing up with things. So this case was taken as a case of visual pollution. And basically this is, I'll just show you some visuals to show exactly what's being done there. And some of this is still under progress. Now, if you say that art is being encouraged and that local people will have something really good, or visitors will get something really nice out of it, like what piece of art is this? It's clear-cut marketing strategy, right? I don't see any art here. But that's how it was conveyed. And unfortunately, the project was done with the local government in Hunza. So I cannot say anything about it because the local government in Hunza has already given them the permission to do it, because it's art and it's promoting art. And to me, like, the most weird thing is the fact that you are painting mountains on top of mountains. Actual mountains are there, and you're painting mountains on them. You can go and see markhors in natural setup there, but these guys decided to paint a markhor there as well. Like, this is so weird, like it's so bizarre, it didn't make sense to me. And all of these things that you'd see there, you can go and experience it in a natural setting too. So I was upset about it, but I haven't done or said anything about it anywhere yet. So before I give you the actual task, then the second one which I shared with you was, and I think there needs to be more information relating to this, is the bandar, which it's written bandal, but it's actually pronounced bandar in Sindh Island and Baddo Island. And both of these islands have now become development project site. Actually, they have been for quite some time now. This dispute between the federal government and the local government, and very big construction companies have, it's like vision. If you envision Dubai, and if you think of, a concrete jungle where a lot of businesses could come and thrive, it's that kind of development plan. It's that big. It's not just constructing something, it's basically making it the hub of business because of its prime location. And it's already, and I think I mentioned it in some of the previous classes as well, the fisheries community that relies on these areas for their livelihood has been banned from getting there. The migratory birds, who, as well as like it was a very good site for biodiversity in that region in Sindh, that has been impacted because of this and will be impacted further. So all of those lectures that we've had in the class, I think you can think of applying them here. And it's actually a Bahria Town project. It's been approved by the government. It will be done with builders from abroad. And now we actually come to what's going to happen today. So I'm going to divide you into 4 groups. Group 1 and 2 will develop a campaign strategy to educate, market, and campaign about that particular issue. And it's up to you, because you're more marketing people, you're the millennials, you know the social media and their strategies more than I do. So I'll let you think about it. And the second one is for Bandel and Bodo Island as well. And what I expect you to do is to basically find what the issue is. And also there's some hidden information. There should be some hidden information there. So for example, for the islands, you should go and find out what kind of species thrive there that would be impacted. For the paint project, you shouldn't just look at the visual pollution, but also about the fact that if there is any chemical pollution associated with it. So group 1 and 2 will look at the paint Gobi and Sweet Tooth's paint project, whereas group 3 and 4 will look at the island projects. You will have exactly half an hour to discuss this. And at the end of 30 minutes, you will be expected to submit one slide, just exactly one slide you have to email it to us so that you don't change it while others are presenting, right? So you email it to us, and then we give you the floor to explain your strategy for education, awareness, as well as action to rest of the class. And then we'll kind of look at it. But make sure that you make use of all the things that we have discussed in the previous lectures, and if anything can relate to it. So for example, here I have said, check if the composition of the paint is available, if there is a safety data sheet. I think Azhan and Paul should know more about it. At least I know more about it because I've read about it. If you don't have the exact composition, you can just say, for example, if the paint is acrylic, of course, if it's being painted on the walls, it should be more water resistant. So you can just go and see what kind of ingredients do water resistant paints contain. And then, kind of see how can you take actions to stop that. And for this one, it's basically just giving awareness on life, biodiversity, livelihood of the local communities, and how that heritage would be impacted. Make sure the natural capital or the ecosystem services that we've mentioned in the class is there in your, I would just call it now, I ignore the terms that I've used there, education, awareness, marketing, not marketing, like education, awareness, and conservation campaigns, where you talk about the importance of the environment and develop a strategy to make positive noise about it in your surrounding environment. Is everybody clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So I'm dividing you into 4 rooms. Group 1 and 2 will take the first issue, and group 3 and 4 will take the second issue. And we are what? Oh, we have very little time. So in 25 minutes, you submit your slides to either Summer or me, and then you present the same slides to us in the class. So you'll have 5 to 8 minutes to present. Each group will have 5 to 8 minutes to present it. And both Summer and I will jump from groups to groups if you have any queries.
This restaurant or dessert place called Sweet Tooth in this remote area in Hunza, and we were basically discussing what is and most environmentally friendly way we could explore to remove the paint. So Hassan, if you could change the slide. Okay, so we needed to first look at the composition of the paints to determine, how what the best way to remove them would be. So the most harmful components that we found were titanium dioxide, volatile organic compounds or VOCs, calcium carbonate, lead, and silica. So basically, these were the harmful chemicals that were being that persist paints. And obviously these were what we had to deal with while considering removal. So Hassan, could you change the slide? So in order to remove the paint in the safest way possible, we needed to determine like different strategies that we could use to get the community engaged. So the first thing that we thought of was social media awareness. So basically, in the age of social media, information travels the fastest through the internet and social media. So we were thinking about different education strategies, awareness campaigns that would basically encourage companies or even people who want to paint their homes, let's say, to consider environmentally friendly techniques for painting. And then also one thing that we considered that would incentivize people to help the paint removal process, because obviously this is something that would require like community participation. So we decided that we would incentivize people using internships, and we would advertise it as sort of like a community service activity. And then the second thing that Maham sort of was basically, there's this travel company, it's called Bedar Experiences, and they travel to places like Hunza, like remote areas, and they're an ecotourism company. So we decided, what if we could collaborate with them in a way in which we could travel with them to have paint removal done in this particular cafe that's been specified. So this was we felt that we could save a lot on travel expenses, and also travel, the environmental sort of the negative impact on travel on the environment. We could sort of conserve that. So next slide, please. So now we get to how exactly we were going to remove these paint, the paint. So the main strategy that we thought of was hydroblasting. So hydroblasting is basically, as the name suggests, it's when you blast water onto these surfaces to remove the paint. So this technique has to be handled very carefully, because obviously when you're hydroblasting, there's a lot of debris, and you need to make sure that you collect the paint and the excess water that has been used, and make sure that it's disposed of properly and responsibly. So hydroblasting is what we decided. And then also bio-based paint removers. So later on we'll show how there are several companies that use natural ingredients in their paints that make them more eco-friendly than paints that have, let's say, titanium dioxide or silica, like we mentioned before. Next slide. So then these are the examples of eco-friendly companies that we found. So there's this one called Anna Sova, which uses milk casein as one of its primary ingredients in paints. And then secondly, there's this other one called Dumont's line of Smart Strip, which is another company which produces like methylene chloride free paint. So this harmful chemical is not present in their paints, and they avoid using harsh chemicals or toxins in their paints. Next slide. So finally, we found this case study, which was interesting. So there was this church that needed to be restored. It had this old like Greek design, and basically the white paint that was used in the church was practically non-breathable because it was so toxic. So the paint removal was achieved using a number of techniques. So the first was paint softener. So one good thing about this was that the paint softener was only used in places where the paint was like especially difficult to get out. So like where the adherence was especially firm, that's when they would use paint softeners. Otherwise, they would just use simple hydroblasting. Basically, the hydroblasting technique was used because there were old coatings as well, and the surface that was being used was bricks. So hydroblasting works especially well on surfaces that include metal surfaces, brick, concrete, things like that. So this was a very well-suited technique. And then finally, this process was actually called Thermatec superheated water cleaning system, which is just another fancy way of saying hydroblasting. This was a very interesting case study that we found. And with that, we are concluding our presentation. So thank you for listening.
Super. Group 2.
Right. So is my screen visible?
Yes,
And
it
am I
is.
audible?
And you're on.
Okay. Just want to give a heads up to the rest of my team. If you guys want to interrupt me at any point to add something or to correct me at all, please go ahead. Like you don't even have to ask, just unmute and start. Okay. I'll try to keep this very short. So we talked about how the island is designed to
Natasha, your voice is disrupting, I think. Natasha, we cannot hear you. Can anyone else from the group speak?
Yes, ma'am, but I don't know where's she has the Natasha has the slides.
Okay, so how about I go for group 3 first and then you guys come later. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am, that's better.
Okay, group 3.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll be speaking for group 3, and I'll share screen for the PowerPoint slide. So we've only made one slide, um, primarily because that's what I thought we were supposed to do. So what we were focusing were on the urbanization project for Bandal and Bundu. I think that's how it's pronounced. And we took a specific focus on their animals because what we want to do is raise awareness on what is exactly happening and how people would be alerted towards the problems. So our title for our campaign poster would be, "If animals are lost, we will pay the cost." And so we'll explain that we need to stop the urbanization project for Vanlambundu and exactly why that is so. So we focused on how this island is a habitat and breeding ground for shrimp, dolphins, turtles, and fish, along with many other species. And also we want to draw our focus towards how it is the mangrove forest. There are a lot of Karachi specifically cherish a lot. Uh, so we also want to have a specific focus on that. And we aren't looking at government-based policies because since this is a poster for the average person, we want to tell the average person what they can possibly do to protect these islands. And so our message is mostly to spread awareness on the significance of the mangrove forest uh, in light of how essential it is for the ecosystem of the city, if not the country. Uh, Push for legislation that regulates commercialization. This point specifically is about how Emar, a private company, is looking to commercialize on these islands to create shopping districts and everything. We want to regulate these shopping districts because if they do environmental damage, they should firstly be prevented from doing so, and if so, regulation would help them mitigate the problems that they've already caused. This already ties in with what Umer Shahid in his article talked about when he said that fishing companies specifically already have caused a lot of overfishing for these islands themselves. So this is part of commercialization, and we want to bring more focus on that, where just because you're able to have fish more cheaply or easily does not mean that you're not there isn't a cost that's included within that. So that, along with just taking part in programs for cleaning up the island, the WWF already hosts a few initiatives and programs to for things that people can do on a daily on by being part of these programs. And I feel that if people uh, were given greater awareness of these islands per se, because I'm sure a lot of people, even in our class, this is the first time they actually heard about these islands. So the more people will get to know that, then the more they'll actually want to take part in doing something for the betterment of that. And that's mostly it. If any of my groupmates wants to add anything, they're more than welcome. I think.
Okay, so if you guys are done and no one else wants to talk, can we just go to group 4 and then we'll come back to group 2? Rafi, you guys are group 4, no?
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be sharing the screen. Just 1 second. Let me just open it. Okay. Can I share?
It's enabled, Rafi.
Okay. Okay, hello, assalamu alaikum everyone. So we are also going to talk about the Bandar and Budo Islands. I don't know how to pronounce that. So me and my team had an outline where we wanted to focus on education, awareness, and action and conservation, all three of these separately. All right. I would like to ask Hanan, can you speak about the education part, please?
Yes, so for education, what our primary objective is to inculcate the teachings about species that are native to these two islands within the educational discourse. Specifically, we are talking about mangroves. So mangroves hold a very pivotal role in how the species interact in all the ecosystem surrounding these islands. Specifically, we are talking about how the marine life benefits. Mangroves are known for being the shelter grounds for breeding for all kinds of marine lives, including fish and crabs, shrimps, etc., and all the exotic species that come with. Also, the mangroves are also known for preventing and being a safeguard against natural disasters such as tsunami or floods, etc. Furthermore, what the construction of and development plans for these islands curtail is that once we have the development going on, the implication is that we'll have even more waste going into the waters and polluting them because of the urban setting that we'll move into. Yeah, so that's pretty much, I think, all about education.
Pirani, Mansoor Pirani, can you talk about awareness, please?
So for awareness, uh, we will we will have an online movement which would include celebrities, and we would collaborate with them so that we would be able to gain as much audience as possible and as much coverage as possible. There's also this one movement by Shanaira Akram alongside Wasim Akram, and they cleaned the Karachi beaches, and they took the initiative of cleaning the Karachi beaches. Another thing that we could do is that we could involve local NGOs in our if we could collaborate with local NGOs in developing educational programs for people to study in institutions, so that we could raise awareness in people, in students basically, and then they could think along the lines of preserving the future, and for all the things, or for all the measures they could take in preventing these environmental hazards. And thirdly, we talked about electronic billboards, which would be a very nice solution to conventional billboards, because it also minimizes the risk of using environmental goods, and it is also an electronic platform, so it could be help us to cover as much exposure and it would help us to convey our message to as many people as possible. Now over to uh, I don't remember who was going to speak. So
Yeah, so the last point is about the action and conservation. So in this part, we particularly have focused on making and informing the student societies all around the universities in Pakistan, just like we have one in LUMS with the name of Leaf. And we will get them on board, and we will get them to know about the all issue that we will currently be facing, and we will take their opinions and take their participation in order to condemn the campaign. And secondly, we will collaborate with the international organizations to force or to pressurize the government to halt the process in such a manner that the government will think about it, and we hope that it will bring an impact on the government to stop these kind of processes in the future, and in the future. Yeah. So I guess if there's something remaining on our group part, anyone can speak.
Yeah, it was my turn. So I wanted to again reiterate the point regarding how it is important for in order to champion these causes, it is important for cooperation with the civil society organizations, particularly the student societies. For we have seen how much attention student societies have been getting since last year, with one particular example we being the Progressive Students Collective, which has championed the causes of the students, of women, marginalized community, and the lower classes in getting their rights. They have achieved success in this since last year, and it would work a lot better if organizations including and like Pakistan Student Collective would make environmental security and specifically the issue of these two islands part of their agenda, and agitate against government for this. So yeah, that's my point.
Very well
Okay,
done,
so
guys. Anybody else from your group?
I think our
um,
group mate has covered almost everything. So I think
Great.
I have not left any point to guide.
Group 2 then.
Okay, so is my screen visible? And am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. So we tried to basically break down this problem into three main parts, which we think will sort of incorporate a discussion of what the current situation is, and secondly, how we're going to be able to solve it, right? In which we first started off by sort of identifying who the main players in these are. We talked about Sweet Tooth Cafe and Gobi's Paints, which are basically the two companies that are collaborating to bring about this paint and everything to the natural landmarks, right? And secondly, we're trying to incorporate both kinds of reservations that people can have with this project, right? So number one, in terms of like the environmental damage, and number two, just the effect that it has on people's sentiments, the fact that they're not being involved, the fact that they're like their local artists are not being given attention to, and it is in fact just a project that Sweet Tooth is carrying out on its own. So that was essentially like the problem that we've identified. The next part we want to talk a bit about is the kind of impact that it has, right, and why those impacts are negative to begin with. And over here, number one, we're going to talk about the fact that this is an artificial addition to their environment. So Hunza has literally been known for being like one of those places that is famous for its natural beauty. So why do we need this addition to begin with, given that it is already famous for being like beautiful and one of those places that is literally Pakistan's hidden gems, right? But secondly, we thought that it's really important to talk about how it's without the prior consent of the locals. So you're literally vandalizing their homes without their consent, without their permission, and you're also not involving them within that, right? Thirdly, we thought, again, this is something we discussed in our course as well, the fact that an excess of everything is bad. So even if this is something that is bringing color to the environment, we don't think that having color in this much excess, so having color on your mountains and your landscapes and your natural landmarks, is something that's even necessary to begin with, right? And lastly, the idea of like the environmental impact. So the paint that is being used over here is acrylic paint, right? Why? Because obviously they needed to have something that is going to be able to withstand weather conditions, like for instance rain or snowfall, etc. So they resorted to taking up acrylic paints, which is usually oil based. And over here, this kind of paint usually includes volatile organic compounds, and during their manufacture there's a lot of carbon dioxide that's emitted, right? So essentially you're contributing majorly to environmental pollution as well. And essentially this is like the entire gist of the problem that we've identified. The second part of this was deciding how we're going to fix this problem, or how we're going to acknowledge it and address it. Over here, we decided that in order to combat the problem of visual pollution, there's two main things that we can do. Number one, we try to spread awareness about the problem via education. So we tell people that environmental damage is an actual problem and why it's going to affect them, right? And over here, our main audience was going to be students, because we think these are going to be people that it's easier to communicate with. Number two, the idea of enforcing fines, so that you can have a sort of mechanism to hold people accountable when they actually carry out, there's a sort of penalty for these actions as well, right? So that's just the main idea behind this. The second thing is, how do we market the fact that environmental protection is very, very necessary? And over here, we have a number of solutions. Number one, talking about how we can utilize the social media or print media to encourage people to care about the environment, to tell them the importance of preserving their natural surroundings, right? Number two, we thought we could engage art students from different colleges, because usually it's much more impactful to hear about like the negative impacts of acrylic paints on your environment, or just like paint even as a medium. We think when this information is coming from art students themselves, that is going to be much more impactful than just a layman going around talking about the impact of paint, right? So we thought in that sense we can incorporate art students as well. Thirdly, we thought we could require local governments to give greater weightage to opinions of the local population, because right now, if you look at it, like Sweet Tooth is also painting its names on all those landmarks that it's painting, right? And that's very, very unfair, because essentially what it seems like is you are prioritizing the profits and the money-making ability of businesses over your local population's opinions. That's also something we thought we should change. And then we can obviously make paint companies understand the costs of their actions, and we can invite environmental activists from, for instance, WWF and similar organizations to talk about the importance of preserving Gilgit-Baltistan's natural environment. But lastly, so once we think we've identified the number of ways we can do this, how do we like actually implement the removal of that paint, right? And over here we came across a number of different mechanisms that we could use. Number one, we could use citrus-based paint remover. And secondly, we thought we could have an alternative solution, such as using soy-based paint remover, which again could be a cause for air pollution, as it contains a little concentration of VOCs. But again, it's on a comparative, we thought it was a much better solution compared to just having those volatile organic compounds in our paint, right? But the reason why we didn't resort to, for instance, hydroblasting or manually scraping the paint was because we thought that the landmark itself could be subjected to a lot of damage, and that's not something we wanted to risk in this entire process of removing the paint, right? So we had to stick to something that is going to remove the paint without causing any kind of erosion or damage to the landmark in general. Just the last thing we wanted to add over here was we saw a similar precedent in Burma. So one of the case studies we saw was in Burma, where you had a similar situation, and the government eventually ended up instituting a ban on graffiti altogether. So we thought that was a good precedent to take in charge over here, and sort of build our laws and our strategy on the basis of what the Burmese government thought was necessary. If anybody wants to add anything, or I don't know, anything, the rest of my team can go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to clear the like soy-based paint remover is an alternative solution, and we mentioned it that because it contains VOC, so we won't use that. Like it's just like another option which is not like safe to use the paint remover. So I think that's
it. Okay, super.
Yes,
thank you so very much for participating in the class and for preparing the presentation and for doing quick research. As you could see that even in this short time, you can have varied ideas, you can have varied options, and of course you calculate your options and the trade-offs whenever you think about any activity. And the reason why I wanted for you to do this activity was to analyze whether with all these lectures and with the little information that you have, are you able to now voice your concerns about an environmental issue in your surrounding? And secondly, to also make you participate more in the class. And thirdly, because I knew it was the midweek, and in the last class, quite a few people were missing as well. In this class, quite a few people are missing as well. So I just wanted to make it light, but also interactive, where you kind of learn something in the class. The reason to do this was in the climate change advocacy campaigns. Scientists don't like it, but our scientific research hasn't convinced that many people. Like, we as scientists believe that our numbers and our figures and our studies should be able to change people's mind. But very often, of course, politicians, it's very hard to convince them anyway, but very often the kind of impact that a photograph has is so much more than a scientific research. And that's why in climate change, you now have a term called climate visuals, where a visual close to home. So let's say a picture, if you're in Karachi, a picture of a dolphin from the coast of Karachi would impact you more than showing a stranded bear somewhere in Alaska. So that term evolved, and I kind of wanted you to also get a gist of that. Of course, we can speak a lot about how to campaign, how to create that awareness. I had personally thought, I know some people used taglines. Generally, when you create a campaign, you give it a title, you give your movement a title. And then after you give it a title, you give it a very catchy tagline that should stand for what you're standing for. And then you make the strategies. So for example, I think it was group 3 who had they had a very nice tagline. So all of those things, I think you should think about whenever you're presenting something, when you want to write about something. As far as some groups had incorporated multiple speakers, I think that was good. I wanted to see more people speak. I was very happy to see some new people speak. Hanan, you've never spoken in the class. You're a discovery today. So so all of you, thank you so much. If you have a query, I can take it, but I don't want to, because we're already over time, I don't want to bombard you with more information. And by the way, you are supposed to send me your slides with your names, and they will be incorporated in today's slides and then re-uploaded on the LMS. Mid. Okay, so your mid is in the next class, and I have prepared very simple questions, but Mansoor finally spoke. No, I made him speak in the last class, but